Сюда его нужно! Его нужно сюда тащить!
Fighters in the mist. This armed camp is an exposed outpost of the Ukrainian military. About 30 men, volunteers from the capital, defending a narrow finger of land. Their tanks, weapons and defences point to the east, south and west. Their enemy is close, somewhere through that haze. They say the pro-Russian separatists regularly attack. This, they say, is shrapnel from Grad rockets that they say came into this position just yesterday. They say 2 men were killed here yesterday, 40 in the last month. To these men, September's ceasefire means nothing. So do Russia's denials about sending fighters and weapons across the border to help the separatists. They say they know they're fighting Russians and they expect a major attack very soon. To prepare for it, they've been working underground. This is where dozens of these men sleep at a time. You can see there is one catching some rest just here. They dug this for themselves only a few weeks ago. Concrete ceiling, timber supports. They desperately hope that this would be able to withstand a direct hit from rocket or artillery or a mortar strike. In this place where they sleep, you can see they read, they keep cigarettes. It is so close to where the action is. Out through this door, come and have a look. Defensive trenches heading in that direction and the other direction as well, because the fighters here tell us that only about 800 meters that way are the forces of the pro-Russian separatists. A short drive away is the town of Debaltseve, or what's left of it. This is government territory, but locals say artillery fired by both sides falls here almost every day, often destroying homes. This is a strange, eerily quiet place, but clearly it has not always been so. Most of the people here have left. The locals tell us it's mostly the young people that have gone behind. The old remain because they say they are too scared and they don't know where else to go. 73-year-old Galina tells me of the terror of living under bombardment. She says she feels like her heart will jump from her body. She's too scared to eat or sleep. These people have little food or power. They dread the coming winter, and they don't care who rules over them. They just want peace.
Знал, пушки какие стоят. А ездил в таком ебать, вот, тигр, видал? Ага. Тигр, нахуй. Нихуя, с первый раз эту тачку видел, ебать. Да. Че, сейчас прикинь, едем, ебать, столько БТРов, колонны прям. Отца мы на Украинке почти до Винска. Прикинь, колонна, война что ли будет, рихую, прям БТРы, КамАЗы, там, тигры, всякое ёбано едет, прикинь. Я тебе серьезно говорю. Молодец. Все снимают и похудел. Ебануться. Едем, да, уже разрешает, приезжаем, давай. Ой, хыс хороший, блядь, завязывай с этим, Лен. Давай. А это что, кран, что ли? Просто.
Murad, so the Russian president claimed democratic values are often being hijacked. Elaborate more on what he said, please.
Well, the president was addressing comments we hear more and more of coming from the West, that Russia is running roughshod over Western ideals and European values. And the president posed a simple question: what exactly are these values? Who decides on them? What are the criteria? What are their definitions? And in fact, the president speculated that they were little more than abstract ideas, ones that serve as convenient and intricate cover for less altruistic political goals. Take a listen.
It's not clear what these interests are because there is no criteria. There is just general talking about democracy. But it's not the right for a coup d'etat, it's not the right for genocide.
The president was speaking at the convention of the People's Front for Russia, a massive pan-Russian organization comprised of more than 1,600 various political parties, trade unions, organizations, and they've taken it upon themselves to chart Russia's path into the future. They look at all sorts of issues, from economic ones to foreign policy to political ones. And while there, he also addressed comments by another speaker who charged the US with trying to bring Russia to heel. And the president said that no, the United States was not trying to humiliate Russia, but bring it under its influence for its own goals, something that the president said no one in history has ever managed to do, and something he promised that nobody in the future ever would.
It's simply unacceptable in the 21st century for countries to attempt to redraw borders by force in Europe, or anywhere for that matter, or to intervene militarily because they don't like a decision their neighbor has made. And so long as that continues, Russia will face rising cost, greater isolation. Thank you all.
Thank you for press.
Есть много желающих, и не только в Киеве, но и в отдаленных.
There are some people, not only in Kiev, but in other parts of the world, which have influence on Kiev. They wish for the Minsk agreements to fail. They wish for the Ukrainian fate to be decided without the people that fight for their right to live on their own soil, to force them into something they never agreed to. I strongly oppose this provocation.
Я считаю, что это провокация чистой воды.
What we know is that back in May, the Russians sent up a satellite rocket, and 3 satellites deployed like expected, but one other piece of space junk came out. Well, now we don't think it was space junk. We don't think it was a rocket booster or anything like that, because it has been maneuvering around the atmosphere. There it is, about 750 miles up in space right now over Antarctica, but about to come back over to the U.S.
Russian President Vladimir Putin met with his Turkish counterpart during a one-day visit to Ankara Monday. Despite stark differences on regional issues like Syria and Ukraine, the two leaders did share a joint goal of tripling bilateral trade by 2020. CCTV's Natalie Carney has more from Istanbul.
With a diplomatic handshake on the doorstep of Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan's brand new presidential palace, the two leaders chose to focus on increasing bilateral trade rather than regional differences. Turkey, which currently depends on Russia for 65% of its energy imports, got the deal it was aiming for. Russia will increase its natural gas supply along the Blue Stream pipeline by 3 billion cubic meters annually and reduce the price.
As our cooperation increases, we will have more reduction in gas prices to Turkey. It will start from the 1st of January with 6%, and even that number can increase. It depends on what kind of cooperation we will have with our partners.
President Putin also expressed disappointment with the European Commission for not giving the green light to the proposed South Stream pipeline project.
I think the attitude of the European Union about this issue is negative. They didn't help in any way for this project to happen, but instead they blocked it.
Meanwhile, Russian state-owned Gazprom announced a massive gas line project that will travel from Russia through Turkey and stop at the Greek border, bypassing Ukraine and giving Russia access to the southern European market. Monday's talks came as the two leaders remain divided on a number of foreign policy issues, most notably Syria. Putin stands virtually alone in defending President Bashar al-Assad, while Erdogan has expressed concern over the fate of the Tatar community in Russian-annexed Crimea.
Yet with Russia facing sanctions from the West over its activities in the Ukraine and Turkey losing trading partners in the Middle East as Islamic State continue their advances in both Syria and Iraq, improving economic cooperation was likely to prevail over any opposing views the two leaders may have on regional issues. Natalie Carney for CCTV in Istanbul, Turkey.
Norwegian military footage shows a Norwegian fighter pilot's close encounter with a Russian MiG. The video released by the Norwegian defence shows the F-16 in close proximity with a Russian aircraft in international airspace. The pilot is forced to perform a sudden manoeuvre to avoid a mid-air collision. According to military experts, the Russian plane could have been less than 20 metres from the Norwegian fighter jet. The military would not say when or where the incident occurred, but said such incidents were rare. The video was released as an example of what Norwegian pilots can encounter on the job when intercepting aircraft in international airspace on behalf of NATO. Last month, the Norwegian defence minister said there had been more Russian military activity in the Arctic and the Baltic Sea, including more planes in different flight formations from previous years.
Russia is scrapping the South Stream natural gas pipeline, which would have bypassed Ukraine, providing an alternate route to Europe for Russian natural gas. As Tom Barton reports, Moscow's souring relations with the EU was a major factor for the cancellation.
It was in December 2012 that Russian President Vladimir Putin announced the start of the South Stream.
We are starting today a practical implementation of one of our biggest infrastructure projects, construction of the gas pipeline along the bottom of the Black Sea.
But 2 years on, the $40 billion project involving Italian, French, German and Russian energy giants to supply more gas to Europe has been halted. Brussels has long said the project might break EU competition rules and has been keen to try and reduce Europe's reliance on Russian gas supplies. In 2006 and 2009, Russia reduced supplies to Europe in winter amid a political row with Ukraine, and has more recently done the same again with Kiev. Relations between Russia and the EU have been severely damaged by Russia's perceived role in the Ukraine crisis.
I think the attitude of the European Union about this issue is negative. They didn't help in any way for this project to happen, but instead they blocked it. If Europe does not want to carry it out, then it will not be carried out. We are not going to make it happen.
Putin says Russia is now looking at other options, including building a major gas supply hub on the Turkish-Greek frontier. Tom Barton, CCTV, Moscow.
Secretary of State John Kerry meets with NATO allies in Europe. Their talks on the first day of the foreign ministers' meeting focused on the crisis in Ukraine and the end of the NATO mission in Afghanistan. CCTV's Jack Barton reports from Brussels.
U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry joined other NATO foreign ministers in Brussels for a meeting that began with an ominous warning from the organization's new Secretary General.
Russia is trying to replace the rule of law with the rule of force.
John Kerry has signalled further sanctions may be required if the situation in eastern Ukraine does not improve.
Russia has not lived up to its promises to end all support for armed separatists, withdraw troops and weapons, release hostages, allow OSCE inspectors to do their jobs, and respect Ukraine's sovereignty and territory.
On Tuesday, NATO announced an interim rapid response force would be combat ready next month, with a full force operational in 2016. The so-called Spearhead Group is designed to bolster confidence amongst NATO members in Eastern Europe. The Rapid Response Group is expected to be a brigade-sized force of about 5,000 troops, backed by air and naval support that can deploy to any trouble spot at short notice. NATO also announced a recent increase in air, sea and troop activities in the Baltic region would be continued throughout 2015. All part of the organization's largest push towards collective defense since the end of the Cold War.
Russia has not lived up to its promises to end all support for armed separatists, withdraw troops and weapons, release hostages, allow OSCE inspectors to do their jobs, and respect Ukraine's sovereignty and territory. In fact, since the September 5th Minsk ceasefire agreement, Russia has funneled several hundred pieces of military equipment and material, including tanks, armored personnel carriers, and heavy artillery pieces, directly to pro-Russian separatists in Ukraine. Russian military forces still operate in eastern Ukraine, where they provide command and control support for the separatists. Russia and the separatists it backs obviously could make a very different choice here. And they could come to the table and they could fully implement the Minsk agreements.
Crimea intervention in eastern Ukraine have taken aim.
Britain's The Guardian says Russian warships have passed through the English Channel. Russian media reports the ships are taking part in training drills. Moscow says they are currently waiting out a storm. The move comes amid increased tensions between the West and Russia over the conflict in Ukraine.
Well, Russia now abandoning its plans for a gas pipeline to Europe, and this is widely seen as a victory by the European Union and also the Obama administration over Vladimir Putin. We haven't had many of those recently, so this is something many say to celebrate. The Russian president said he will instead direct this line to Turkey. KT McFarland is a former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense under President Reagan and a Fox News national security analyst, and of course you worked for others in the administration as well. KT, so is this a win that this is now going down through Turkey and not through Europe? Is it a win for us?
It is such a huge win, you can't even imagine it. You know, a couple of years ago, everybody was saying, oh, we're running out of oil. We have to go to alternate sources of energy. When Putin moved tanks into Georgia in 2008, everyone said, we can't do anything about it because Russia supplies all the energy and natural gas to Europe. Flash forward today. There has been an energy revolution, and we've been at the forefront of it. It's been fracking oil and natural gas. As a result of that, countries like Russia and other ones that we don't like, they're broke. I mean, they may not have played out yet, but they're sitting on top of constricting economies. When they had the high oil prices 10 years ago, they didn't use that windfall profit wisely. They didn't build alternate forms of industry or manufacturing. They didn't build infrastructure. All they did was got rich oligarchs, military buildup, Putin got the Olympics, and the people got subsidies. As a result, once these oil prices go down and stay down, which they will, Russia doesn't make payroll.
All right, but Russia still has deals and could be lucrative deals with the Chinese, also now with Turkey. I mean, that alliance doesn't sound like it's necessarily a good thing for the United States.
Yes and no. Why? Because we're really going to be able to set the price of a lot of energy going forward. And if you look at world history since the Industrial Revolution, all the major wars have been fought over energy. The countries that have had it have been rich. The countries that haven't have been broke. The countries that haven't had it, they go to war over it. So Russia is making deals with China. It's making deals probably ultimately with Iran and with Turkey. But at the end of the day, their energy sources are constricting because they're running out of oil and natural gas in western Siberia. Those fields are playing out, and they need to develop them in the east. Guess who has the technology to do that?
Well, we do. We have the technology. Yep. We also have the oil and gas, but some things would have to change then in Washington. Explain.
I think we're a couple of political decisions away from having this be the second great American century. Why? Because we're going to have cheap oil prices. That's good for the consumer in America. That's good for American industry. It creates new jobs. There's going to be a second wave, and that's when manufacturing, which used to go overseas because it was too expensive to make stuff in America, that stuff comes back because we have cheap energy and our cost competitiveness, we can make stuff cheaper than anybody else. And then there's a third wave where cheap energy marries up with high-tech stuff, 3D printing, robotics, bioengineering, all the things that only we have been able to develop. And that is an energy and economic and manufacturing renaissance for the United States. So I'm really bullish on the future.
You know, I have to say, it is so nice to hear some positive news and some optimism, because so much has been about ISIS and the threat of additional terrorism and all that, but not to mention an economy that is good when you look at the statistics, but no one here feels like it's a great economy, or at least many Americans don't feel like it's a great economy. You really believe things are changing?
You're not getting coal in your stocking this Christmas. You understand that within 5 years, the United States is going to have an economic boom and a renaissance which will make the previous tech booms and the original Industrial Revolution pale by comparison, and we're the only country that's going to be able to do that.
KT, I sure hope you're right. We would
Merry Christmas.
love to see that happen. All right, thank you so much, KT McFarland, one of our Fox News analysts.
What they do manage is to subdue their allies, bringing them under their influence. They do manage it because, unfortunately, many of their allies are harming their own national interests, which is absolutely obvious, by trying to protect foreign national interests for unclear reasons and with unclear perspectives.
So a lot of very strong rhetoric there, but it wasn't all about foreign policy. Various very pressing social and economic issues were also addressed, and the president once again reiterated that Russia does not want isolation. Russia wants to stay open with the outside world, to trade with its partners, to deal with its partners, but that given the prevailing and highly turbulent political winds of our time, that Russia has to be prepared for everything.